Hi again. In Edmond Gruss's book, Apostles of Denial, Chapter 4 is entitled The History of Jehovah's Witnesses, the Period Under Charles Taze Russell, 1870 to 1916. Now, Gruss has some extremely good insights into the relationship between doctrines, the early assumptions of Russell and where he got them from, and what these doctrinal assumptions led to, even in the way of the Bible's authority. Apparently, Russell could not accept the Bible if it taught the doctrine of eternal punishment. That's definitely the impression you get as you read the early writings of Russell and even Nelson Barber, that this was a necessary phase in his development, that is Russell's development as a thinker, that if the God of the Bible was capable of eternal punishment, the Bible itself was not worthy of credence. Now, Gruss takes up some of the early life of Russell before he gets to that point. Before the founding of the Watchtower, this commitment had been made by Russell and several others in his coterie, including Nelson Barber, who he later was estranged from. Gruss says, with these words written in 1912, W.T. Ellis characterized Charles Taze Russell as he found him in a personal interview. Quote, I sought a prophet and found a businessman. Instead of a humble seeker after truth, I found the cleverest propagandist of the age, a man before whom John Alexander Dowie, Mary Baker Eddy, Madame Blavatsky, Abbas Effendi, Elijah Sanford, and Joseph Smith pale into puerile ineffectiveness. End of quote. That's from W.T. Ellis, Investigating an Investigator in the Continent, 1912. Is this estimate of Russell just? To find the answer, this chapter will retrace the life of this man who was one of the most controversial religious leaders of his time. Actually, the first segment of Watchtower Bible and Tract Society history is largely the history of Charles Taze Russell. He was the society. His background and formative years. Charles Taze Russell was born February 16, 1852, in Old Allegheny, now a part of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. He was one of three children born to Joseph and Eliza Burney Russell. His parents were Presbyterians and Scotch-Irish descent. Russell's father ran a clothing store business and did well in this endeavor. Russell's mother died when he was but 9 years of age. At 15, he joined his father in the growing chain of clothing stores. One E.D. Stewart, a follower of Russell, reflects the typical attitude of the Bible students as he writes that Charles' parents were of the Orthodox faith, and up to the age of 15 he believed all and only such doctrines as his sectarian minister took the trouble to teach him. That's from E.D. Stewart, Life of Pastor Russell, published in Overland Monthly, 1917. All went well for Russell until, at the age of 16, he tried to win an infidel friend to Christianity, but the infidel completely routed young Russell, and he became a skeptic. He saw, for instance, that with the doctrine of eternal torment in it, he could not believe the Bible. This account explains why Russell, in order to accept the Bible, had to eliminate the doctrine of eternal punishment. Thus, at an early age, he rejected most of his early training as a member of the Allegheny City, Pennsylvania Congregational Church and the local YMCA. He made a study of the Oriental religions, but they did not satisfy him. During this period of a shaken faith, a struggle began. He could not believe the teaching he had received as a child, the creeds of the Orthodox churches, but he could not throw Christianity away altogether. At the age of 18, the ray of light which caused a return to some form of faith was found in a dingy basement near one of Russell's clothing stores. His experience is recorded in these words. Quote, seemingly by accident, one evening I dropped into a dusty, dingy hall where I had heard religious services were held to see if the handful who met there had anything more sensible to offer than the creeds of the great churches. There, for the first time, I heard something of the views of Second Adventists, the preacher being Mr. Jonas Wendell. That from the Watchtower reprints. There is good evidence to believe that from the Adventists, a remnant of the old Millerite movement, Russell received his light on the non-existence of eternal punishment, the second coming of Christ, and biblical chronology. After this experience with the Adventists, he joined them. A short time later, Russell and some of his business and social friends got together to study the Bible. It's interesting to note that one of the study group members was Russell's father, who died in 1897 after having been a close associate in the work. This group, according to Russell's report, systematically studied the Bible, and as would be expected, the first finding was on the subject of hell and soul sleep after death. Macmillan writes concerning their new find, this is A.H. Macmillan, by the way, in Faith on the March, this was certainly a departure from the spiritual fare they had been receiving through the creeds based on tradition. It is strikingly strange for one to study the Bible starting from this point. Actually, according to his own position, as cited by Stewart, Russell had to eliminate the doctrine of eternal punishment to believe the Bible, a method of study seen throughout the system. The Bible was studied in the light of previously conceived theory. After a time, Russell began to differ with Adventism on biblical interpretation, especially on the manner and subject of the Lord's return, although the chronology was left intact. Russell crystallized his views in the pamphlet, The Object and Manner of the Lord's Return. From his study group, Russell went forth with a no-hell doctrine. Ferguson, in his characteristic style, writes, quote, after a careful and painstaking study of Holy Writ, he came to the comforting conclusion that the Bible did not teach the doctrine of hell. With this good news, he began, at the age of 20, a ministry which lasted 42 years and cheered the hearts of hillbillies in every nook and cranny of the democracy. Then there's a footnote. After the reference to Faith on the March by A.H. Macmillan, the heart of Russell's theology is the denial of immortality and eternal punishment, but this doctrine will not bring satisfaction, so men's efforts are viewed as qualifying him for life and future bliss. Thus Russell taught that man must obtain everything by merit. In the interest of his theory, he divided the history of the world into three great dispensations. In each of them, man is given an opportunity to merit for himself the right to live in this world forever by obedience to God's laws. Russell's divine plan is the coarsest kind of works or work righteousness. That's from F.E. Meyer, M-A-Y-E-R, Jehovah's Witnesses, published in 1957, originally 1942. The quote by Ferguson, by the way, is Charles W. Ferguson, The Confusion of Tongues, a book published in 1929. So this basic teaching, then, for the Watchtower, that even under the foundation of the authority of the Bible, is the doctrine that a God of love cannot punish people eternally. Now, there are many people in Christendom who believe that, by the way. So there's differences of opinion. So to associate the doctrine of hellfire with the creeds is just not right. It's not accurate. Because the creeds, and this, going back to the very earliest creed, the Apostles' Creed, have no teaching on afterlife or hell, except that one day we will rise again. So the resurrection is the eschatology of the early church, not hellfire. That doesn't mean nobody believed it. Some did, because they took Jesus' words on Gehenna and Revelation's words on the lake of fire quite literally. And therefore they thought they were founding their teaching on Bible itself. It was not a precondition to their belief in the Bible that hellfire be not a biblical teaching, not a you might say a possibility in the universe as created by a loving creator. So the church has differed on this all along the line, and that's reflected in the early creeds, which did not retain a teaching on this or on the millennium. So really we're off to a bad start with this idea that this must separate true Christians from all others. Early Christianity was diverse on this as many other subjects. I'll put in a link to W.E. Vine, who is of the Brethren movement, by the way, but he is the vine of the Expository Dictionary of New Testament Words, and he has much to say on the doctrine of what the Bible actually says about hell and afterlife. What you do with what it actually says is the problem. And Vine is, of course, among those who believe that hellfire is a biblical teaching. And, of course, many Orthodox and certainly conservative Christians who believe in the inerrancy of Scripture believe that. But they base it on Scripture, not on church tradition or creeds. They have no more love for creeds than Jehovah's Witnesses do. However, this is a misrepresentation. What Russell early believed about the creedal confessions is not accurate. And that's what needs to be said when we examine the founding of the Watchtower movement. So William Vine has first of several videos on hell and the afterlife from Vine's Expository Dictionary of New Testament Words. See you next time.